Hey everyone, it's really great to be here. In some ways, this feels like a true coming home for me, not only to FITC, but to Toronto. For more than a decade, I have been working in communications, primarily for design and tech. In the earlier years of my career, I worked for FITC as their manager of conversation. It was in this role that I first met so many people that had a profound influence on my career today, and there's far too many of them to list, but I must give a worthy shout out to Toronto tech legend and catalyst of careers, Sean Pucknell. And also, it's important to call out all the people who actually get things done around here. Alfred, Jack, Aaron, Patrick, Matthew, Linda. There's a lot more of you, but at least those folks I'm close with. So thank you for having me speak on my home turf. It's really heartwarming to see so many familiar faces in this room. So for the last 5 years, I've been living in the Bay Area, working for Adobe. When I returned home to Toronto this past December, they liked me enough to keep me on board as a social media strategist. My focus these days, as Patrick mentioned, is one of our newer products, Adobe XD. It's a design and prototyping tool, so if you're designing experiences for screens or voice interactions, you'll probably want to check it out. So what does a social media strategist do exactly? Like many job titles, mine certainly doesn't capture it all. First and foremost, I'm a communications professional who thinks about content a lot. What it encompasses, how it's created, who's creating it, and how we're sharing it. I also spend a lot of time developing engaging social-first campaigns that drive awareness of our products and active use of them. And I'm here to really help Adobe maintain its position as a thought leader in design. So some of the things I've worked on at Adobe, Patrick mentioned World Interaction Design Day. That's one of my more prouder things that I've worked on. It's a global initiative to show the impact of interaction design on the human condition. It's it's 1 day a year. People host events all over the globe around a theme. And last year, FITC actually helped us host an event here in Toronto, and I'm happy to share that they'll be doing that again this year on September 24th, so look out for news around that. I also run our Max Insiders program, which is a social influencer experience at Adobe Max, the world's largest creativity conference. I oversee our ongoing social influencer programs for XD and beyond, and that includes commissioning UI resources from some of the top designers. Do we have any podcast listeners in here? Yeah? So I also worked on a podcast called Wireframe. It's hosted by our principal designer, Koi Vin, and it's all about how design helps tech fit into our lives. So I hope you'll add that to your feed. I also oversee all the content for the Adobe blog with help from our MC, Patrick Waller. Shout out. And sometimes I get to work on cool customer stories, like how Tony Hawk used XD to design his first mobile game. And let's be honest, Tony Hawk didn't design it. His very talented team of designers did. But anyway, so since I started out, a whole lot has changed. The platforms have changed, attitudes have changed, influencers have emerged, and it's this last piece that I'm going to focus on with you today. So usually when I mention the term social influencers to folks that don't work directly in my field, one or a combination of reactions happens. An eye roll followed by a groan, a look of total confusion, or an interest in how to become one. So let's address all three of these reactions. The eye roll followed by a groan. Here comes the groan. So I hate to give any more of a platform to she who throws chairs off balconies onto the QEW as a way to gain followers and attention. But it's important to note that many media outlets actually labeled this person of very poor judgment as an influencer. We also all know the kind of influencers who use their network to hawk gummy bears to make your hair grow or tea to make you thinner. And all of these things are making the influencer title feel a bit toxic, a phenomenon that people are starting to blame problems on. I mean, it's understandable that there's collective concern that people are using their rather large following to send arguably harmful messages and, or worse, pulling stunts on social for infamy, followers, and the shady but potentially lucrative brand deals that might follow. There are other ways to do it, though. And I would like to believe we've tapped into a formula that works for both our brand and community. You can use your following to inspire, educate, support, and generally give back to those who've made room for you in their feeds. And the right brand partnerships can really help with that. So the next reaction, the look of total confusion. What is a social media influencer anyway? So we define a social media influencer as an individual who's accumulated a mass engaged social following due to the content they create and their consistent activity on social media. More specifically, in my world, an influencer is really just a talented, hardworking professional who turns out a lot of inspirational work and engages with their community, and their rather large social following is a result of that. It's also a serious bonus when they happen to share their knowledge too, teaching those who want to follow in their footsteps how to use creative tools to express themselves as well. Finally, an interest in how to become one. So I imagine most of you in this room are at a tremendous advantage as you cover off the first few qualifiers in how I define a social media influencer in my world. You're talented, hardworking, and turn out inspirational work. If you don't, start there. This talk will not help you with that. So that leaves engaging with the community and building a rather large social following. One is a bit easier than the other. So before we get into the nitty-gritty and not so surefire steps to becoming a creative social influencer, I should mention that I realize not everyone in this room expects to have brands pay them to post or promote their content on their social channels. It's also not realistic to expect that kind of scale for everyone in this room. There is value, though, in building up your social presence that extends beyond this. You, as creatives, have a personal brand. How well it's crafted, represented, and consumed is fully up to you. Social media in many ways is a new creative portfolio. So even if you're not looking to land the modern day endorsement deal, it's worth paying attention to because it could still mean your next paycheck. Your network is arguably more valuable than the work you're doing today because it's your next job. It's your next recommendation. It should extend beyond face-to-face and into the digital realm so you can get that next job or recommendation. And it should be connected to your brand, whether that's personal or professional. So now, let's get into the nitty-gritty, not so surefire steps to becoming a creative social influencer. We'll start with the basics. So when developing a social media program, I generally build out a plan based on a social media framework. This helps set things up for success by defining what success looks like at the outset. I'm going to go through this at a pretty high level because I literally could spend all of my time getting into the weeds on this, and I have before. So it all starts with a goal. Before engaging in an ongoing social media strategy, ask yourself what you're hoping to achieve here. The goal you identify for social should ladder up to a larger business goal. A business goal might be increasing your overall revenue, attracting new clients, working with a certain brand or brands, being known for a certain aesthetic, landing a book deal, the list goes on. A goal is just a means to express an end to which you direct energy to. You'll then want to set some objectives, which ladder up to your goal: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Some people call them SMART objectives. You may have encountered this before. These are the KPIs that will speak to whether or not you're on track to meeting that larger goal. Your strategy is really how you're going to achieve your overarching goal. It should be really high level, not too tactical. Then you want to think about who you're really trying to reach in order to achieve your goal. Think about their location, their age, gender, interests, income. Do your research. Look at your channels to date, see who's engaging with your work. Are these the kind of people that are going to help you achieve that larger business goal? If not, you might want to take a look at what you're posting. And finally, follow the money. I always say this because, one, you can run a basic ad campaign and see who converts the best, or two, you can see who's actually buying your products and again, engaging with your content today. Who's hiring you? Are these the people you want to work for? Why are they hiring you? That goes back to the doing your research part. So tactics are what you're actually going to do. what you're going to create, when you're going to post it, what channels you're going to post it on. It's kind of like, it's the nitty-gritty of like what you're actually going to do in order to achieve your goal that lines up with your strategy. You can start to see this trickle-down effect. Budget probably feels like a weird one to be attached to a person or a personal brand or a social influencer, but time is money, and you need to sort of outline how much you're willing to invest. Also, you might want to do some paid promotions or giveaways, and all those things cost money, so it's an important thing to take into account. Measurement is how you're actually going to measure if you've been successful. It's something you want to think about at the outset when you're setting those objectives. How are you going to measure them? So this brings us to channels. You want to be on the right channels to achieve your goal. Think about the audience you're trying to reach and the kind of content that you excel at creating, and that should point you in the right direction. As creative professionals, I've made some assumptions based on my experience to call out some of the channels that brands are most likely to discover you on. We all know Instagram is ideal for visual content and content discovery. Twitter, it's really the platform for immediacy. It's ideal for thought leadership and at live events. YouTube is great for how-tos and storytelling, and if you're a video pro, YouTube or Vimeo are really your playgrounds. Behance is a fantastic portfolio site. It's great for inspiration and visual storytelling. Also, not a lot of people know this, but if you have a Creative Cloud subscription, you do get access to Adobe Portfolio for free, so it's a great way to get an online presence up and rolling, and it attaches to your Behance profile. Dribbble, also great for portfolio reasons. They're not full-blown projects on Dribbble, but it's a good way to show the kind of work you're capable of creating. And actually, the kind of content you find on Dribbble tends to be ideal for social, because it's like micro animations, little snippets of great UX and graphic design work. There's also LinkedIn, perfect for B2B. If your goal is lead generation, LinkedIn's probably where you want to be. It's also really good for editorial content, and it can help you establish yourself as a thought leader in your field. Facebook is great for media brands, visual content, and event promotion. And Snap, well popular amongst the youngins. It's not great for brands unless you're really targeting a younger audience and you have a big budget, because you almost need a whole production studio as a brand to make that work well. Pinterest is great for imagery and if you're driving sales. So if you have a lot of beautiful design products, I suggest you create a board of them and encourage people to pin them. And I threw on Reddit here because while Reddit is one of those content aggregates, it's a great place. If you are creating content that would appeal to a niche audience like fan art or something like that, Reddit's a great way to create a name for yourself or establish yourself around certain communities. I encourage you to pay attention to trends by following other like-minded creatives and others in your industry, and also look at growth channel metrics, meaning see how your channels are growing, who's following you, at what rate, what seems to be getting sticky, where you're gaining traction. You also want to understand the investment required for all these various platforms, because again, if you're going to have a presence, you want to be present. So a good way to do that is maybe talk to someone like me, someone who spends a lot of time thinking about social and what's involved in really building a successful presence. So you don't want to be a bot. You want to make sure your profile is complete. I know it sounds basic, but these basics really matter. You want to make sure your profile picture is recognizable. So if you're not going to use a picture of your face, so like say you want to use your work instead, it should align with your brand or the work you are doing and what you want to be known for. You want to include your location, even if it's just the closest major city. For global brands like ours, it's really important to know where the influencer we're engaging is located, and also to know what team should reach out to them in what capacity, for what opportunity. It's important. And finally, you want to link to your portfolio or a place where there's additional contact information, because these aren't always the greatest places to put your email unless you have a manager like at Furry Little Peach. This also seems pretty obvious, but you want to get a good username. Should be easy to spell, type, and repeat, also easy to remember. You want to avoid underscores, difficult spelling, long handles, and it should align with your name or your brand. You also want to make it easy to get in touch. As I mentioned before, you want to link to that website or portfolio. You can open up your DMs on Twitter so people can message you even though you're not following them. You can create an email for fielding different types of work inquiries. And one thing that's been really good for us is when a freelancer or an influencer writes when they are and aren't taking work. So even if you know that you're booked up for the next 2 months, just note that on your website, because then we'll know whether or not to reach out and start a whole conversation. And finally, it's okay to set boundaries on what you'll reply to, especially as you get more popular. I have to call out Kat Small here because she has on her website created a page that outlines the requirements for whether or not she'll take a speaking gig. And she also has a whole blog post on the requirements for her to accept a coffee meeting. So she really sets out to everyone in advance, this is what I will and will not engage with, and super helpful in managing and protecting her time. Sure. I'll also make these slides available so everybody can take a look. So now that you have the basics down, it's time to start building your audience. So you want to show your best work. You want to be consistent and on point. If you have a presence, be present. I feel like I'm saying that a lot. You'll probably hear it one more time. And you want to engage. Appreciate those who appreciate your work. That will help build brand affinity. Scott Martin, aka Burnt Toast Creative, he's in this room, by the way. Oh, shout out Scott. Is a great example of someone who regularly posts on brand and fantastic work. Even the work he's developed in partnership with brands, it doesn't diverge from his signature style. He's consistent and on point, and his work is very recognizable. You also want to optimize for the platform. You want to scale your work for the platform you'll be posting to. The same piece of work doesn't work across every platform per se. However, if you have a larger story to tell, like a brand identity, one project can be shared across many channels, but in different ways. So, for instance, with that example of a brand identity, you could do a behind the scenes on Instagram stories. You could create an in-feed carousel post on Instagram featuring various project elements. You can build a detailed Behance project which shows all the pieces. This is actually an example of an icon set that I commissioned from Creative Mints, and you can see how he has taken the content and applied it across different platforms. You also want to get to know the algorithm of these various platforms and how to play within them. People look at social media on their phones, right? So while it's a little unintuitive, most video that you post should be 9:16 vertical. It's preferred on most platforms, unless you're on YouTube or Vimeo. Those are a bit different. And we know that Instagram stories are seeing explosive growth. So think of ways to leverage this while still driving in-feed engagement. A good example of that is doing photo sneaks. So if you're a photographer or designer and you post a new thing in feed, you can create an Instagram story that says go check out my latest post, and maybe blur it out or show a little sneak of it, and then drive people back to your feed for engagement. You also want to cross-promote. You want to use all the networks that are available to you to cross-promote your content to build your following. It's okay to reach out to other friends and established creatives to ask for a shout out. Again, being shameless once in a while is a-okay. You also can look at coordinating collaborations. Our creative resident focused on XD. Does everyone here know what our creative residency program is? I'll just give you a quick sentence. We basically let people apply to pursue a project for a year with Adobe, and we just fund them and give them opportunities to speak and stuff. It's actually pretty cool. You guys should look out for the application process, particularly if you're earlier in your career. Well, one of our creative residents for XD, Andrea Hawk, she was looking to build up her YouTube following, so she connected with Forever Dansky, who is an XD social influencer who is known for his YouTube tutorials. They each created a video for each other, featuring each other, and then they cross-promoted it, and it drove engagement for both of them. People love free stuff. Giveaways can be a cheap way to reach fans and build your following. You want to make sure you're following local laws and restrictions if you ever start to dabble with these. And you want to make sure whatever you're giving away aligns with your brand and overall goal for your presence. Karen Cavett is a graphic designer and crafty DIYer on YouTube, and she does an annual roundup of gift ideas for designers. So everything she features in this video, she gives away. I know actually most of these items are provided by brands because she has a pretty established following at this point. However, Willie Morris, he's an all-around creative and vlogger, and he did a series of backpack giveaways, and the backpacks held camera equipment, making them on brand, and he did this as an effort to, again, build his own social following, and I'm pretty sure he funded those backpacks, at least initially. So now that you've got the basics down, and you've built up a bit of a following, let's talk about the deals that might follow. Authenticity is critical to your long-term success. You want to choose your partners and your briefs carefully. Brands should pick influencers that align with their goals and values, and influencers should work with brands that align with their goals and values. Again, in a perfect world, right? I should acknowledge that Adobe has a pretty amazing advantage when it comes to finding the right kind of social influencer to engage. Our products literally equip users with the tools necessary to create the kind of content you can't help but double tap. The folks we generally engage are already using our products and see benefit from them, so they're truly excited to work with us and usually find it a mutually beneficial partnership. I know that's not the case with everyone, but working with a brand that isn't authentic to the channel you're building can have a negative impact on what you're trying to do. So at this point, you might be wondering, how do you proactively build these kinds of relationships with brands? First, you want to get on their radar. An easy way to do that is tag your posts appropriately with product handles and branded hashtags. Look at the hashtags the brand's actually using on their channels, and that's a good guide to where to get started. You also want to create content that showcases why you'd make a great partner. And when you're really ready and you've done all of the things we've talked about, then reach out. So Daniel White, aka Forever Dansky, who I've mentioned earlier, he has a YouTube channel full of Adobe tutorials. They are well produced and highly engaged with. He was a natural fit for us to partner with, and we've done a lot of work with him, from events to UI kits as a result. Marissa Blair, aka ExoPixel, who's based here in Toronto. She's created a website full of slick videos and blog content about design and XD. She actually sent the XD Twitter handle a DM to find out how we could partner, and we liked her enough to do a whole lot. So she's hosted Adobe Live and our daily creative challenges, both part of our ongoing live stream effort on Behance, and she's also done a ton of tutorials and things with us. It's great. Being authentic goes beyond not only the brands you choose to work with, but how you choose to work with them. Illustrator and hand letterer Lauren Holm does these weekly homework challenges for our community where she gives them a theme and encourages them to create and share work around that theme. To promote our 99U conference in NYC, we sponsored a homework challenge with Lauren, and it was based on the conference theme, Challenge Everything. Lauren was attending the conference anyhow, and this was an extension of something she was already doing. It was authentic, on brand, and something her audience was already highly engaged with. All right, let's talk about paper. Whether you're engaging with a small or a big brand and money is being exchanged for deliverables, you'll want an agreement. This is to protect both you and the brand. I'm going to pay attention to the fine print, and if you get to a point where you have a manager, please don't let them get in the way. Look out for usage and ownership rights so you understand how your work can and will be used and for how long, and who ultimately owns it. Understand the non-compete and how it applies. This could impact how you engage with other brands for the next little while. And then the turnaround time. This is the one thing that can really hurt relationships. Make sure you can deliver on what you're signing up for in the time frame you're committing to. Now, when it comes to fees, you want to charge for your work and your network. When pricing an engagement, think about what the work is worth as a creative professional if you were to bill hourly, and figure out what that translates to. Then add on, what is your network worth? Okay, so Adweek has thrown out this crazy, well, I shouldn't call it crazy. Adweek has thrown out a number where they say $100 per 10,000 followers. But like I said, take this with a huge grain of salt. Followers are great. Engagement is better. You might have 1 million followers and get a few hundred likes on all of your posts. But if you have 2,000 followers and get a few hundred likes on all of your posts, that's going to mean a lot more to me. It sends the right signal that your content resonates with a highly qualified audience. And then ask yourself, what is working with this brand worth to you? You know, are they adding value? Are they helping you achieve your goal or not? And finally, talk to each other. Know your value, keep your ego in check, and keep the lines of communication open. It's okay to ask questions, negotiate, and so on. So once that deal is struck, and it's time to put content out into the wild, you'll want to make sure you're not breaking any laws. When you're being compensated by a brand in exchange for promotion to your network, be sure to properly disclose the relationship according to local laws and regulations. If you have received something from a brand, whether it's an invite, a product, or a trip, and you choose to share it on social media or your blog, you need to let your fans and followers know what you've received and who you've received it from. This could change based on location. In Canada, influencer engagements are regulated and enforced by Canada's Competition Bureau. In the US, influencer engagements are regulated and enforced by the Federal Trade Commission. So let's say you are engaging with a US brand and attending an event on US soil. You'll want to abide by FTC regulations, but since you're based in Canada, you'll also want to make sure that you're abiding by Canada's regulations as well. So always think about the country you're based in and the country that you're doing work in. Those are the two areas you want to check off. There is different regulations in Europe and other parts of the world as well. So again, it's all good to pay attention to. Generally, for most posts, and I'm speaking in really broad strokes here, hashtag insert brand here, partner, ad, sponsored, or paid in your caption above the fold where the message is truncated is enough for disclosure. On the platforms that allow you to mark a paid promotion like Instagram and YouTube, you want to do that as well, but that alone is not enough. You can find full details on all of this online. And again, this is not just to protect you as an influencer, but as a brand. I know historically when these things are enforced, they tend to go after the influencers first, but now brands are also on the hook, so everybody's looking out to protect themselves on this one. So you've come this far. Don't mess it up. You don't want to do anything wildly out of character without warning. Brands have engaged you based on your track record, and if you diverge from that, there's a risk of hurting the relationship. You want to dance with the brand that brought you. So you should feel good about the brands that you engage with. In order to maintain credibility, you need to remain credible. So saying one brand is at the top of your list only for the next week to say another brand is at the top of your list and they're competitors and there's clear sponsorship doesn't look good to you. It's off-putting to your followers and it's off-putting to future brands that might want to engage with you. It's really hard to go back after that. And finally, feedback doesn't need to be the F word, although sometimes it involves it. Influencer engagements are unique because you're the client of your client. At the end of the day, brands need to treat influencers they engage with like the customers they are. Since I started up at Adobe, we've scaled up our influencer program significantly. Just last year, I was running a program at Adobe Max with around 100 creatives from around the globe. But I'll never forget that first year. We had a total of 5 creatives in the program, one of which who did the titles for FITC this year, Mike Winkleman, aka Beeple. He's also the guy who designed all your badges you're wearing and all of the artwork we're seeing around here. So now I should start by saying I love Mike. His work, his dedication to the craft, his sense of humor, his general demeanor, he is absolutely fantastic. But during that first year at Max, I got a couple of emails from our social analysts, which had me a little concerned for our future working together. I'm just going to leave this up here for a minute. I mean, like I said, I'm a fan, so I can't say I was terribly surprised by this at all. However, this did mean I had to have a quick conversation with Mike about our actual event tagline, and he got my vibe right away. And while his posts from that point on were still authentic to his brand, they weren't concerning for ours. We've worked with Mike a ton on a lot of different projects since this happened, and I actually had him back at Max this last year. And when we caught up in person, we reminisced about that first year. I think we were talking about how he just had done an engagement with Louis Vuitton, and he said something along the lines of me. He said something to me along the lines of, "I can't believe some of the things I posted. Now that I've worked with a lot of different brands, I would never ever do that. You were so nice trying to tell me to tone it down." He graciously gave me permission to share this story today, and it just makes us both laugh now. It seems like we've both learned a whole lot in this evolving brand and influencer dance, and I'm incredibly humbled and grateful for the relationships that I've been able to build in this role. To the creatives I have yet to work with, I look forward to seeing your work in my feeds. Thank you. How are we for time? So we have like 5 minutes left. Like if anybody has any questions that you want me to quickly address, I can. Yes. So I know that that's going to be like a visual cue on the front end. However, we still have access to analytics to a certain degree with Instagram. Also, we use a number of different tools in order to identify social influencers, and those provide us actually literally with an engagement rate in a percentage form. Yeah. But we're always paying attention to those things. The question, was with Instagram removing the visual cue for likes in the feed, like how will we be able to measure engagement rate? Anything else? Back there? So the question, I believe, is, got it. How do we think that removing likes from the Instagram feed will impact this whole influencer thing? I think at the end of the day, like, we're most interested in engaging and supporting creatives. So if someone is putting out work into the audience or out into the ether that is like of a high bar, we'll probably engage them in a number of different ways. And also, like, I know Instagram is seeing explosive growth, but it's not the only social platform, period. And again, we'll still, I don't think that's going to de-incentivize people from posting on Instagram at all, actually. And like I said, like, let's put this social influencer thing aside for a minute and just think about what Instagram can do for creatives in terms of being a creative social portfolio. That alone should be incentive enough to post on there, never mind the actual likes. Like just having a presence, right? Because at the end of the day, if you're applying for a job as a creative, like, I don't know if anyone does hiring here. I'm sure there's lots of people in the room, but when I'm hiring someone, like the first thing I do is Google them and see their online presence. So maintaining a good one, especially in the creative field, is really important. Yeah. So the question is how do I feel about creatives that mix personal photos of their live along with their creative work? I mean, everybody's human, right? Like, I think what you need to think about is what that larger goal is. If you are using it as a portfolio piece, maybe you think about the personal photos that you do post on there. And it's also okay to have 2 Instagram accounts. I've actually encountered that a lot with influencers, where they'll have like a friends and family Instagram, basically, and it's usually private, and then they have their really public presence. So, I mean, if there's a real benefit to mixing that kind of content in, then sure, but like, I wouldn't say that would totally put me off, but it may put off your audience who's expecting a type of content from you on a regular basis. There are folks that literally have a full presence dedicated to their lifestyle, so it really depends. Any other questions? Oh, I see you in the back. Yeah, that's you. collective. So the question was basically, I mean, we're all totally maxed out for time. And at the end of the day, like maybe the last thing we want to do is maintain a social presence. But what if you got together a group to like collectively maintain a presence? Yeah, I mean, that's cool. If you guys are all aligned again on like a larger goal, like what is that collective going to be? Like, are you going to brand yourselves as an agency? When a lead comes in, like how are you going to handle that? I think just setting like guidelines on what you would do there. But at the end of the day, you're creating a brand and there's a lot of people contributing to it. How you all benefit from that is something I would just figure out from the outset. All right, I am officially done. Thank you. I'll be around, so if you have more questions.